Hi everyone. This is going to be a little bit of a different video than what I usually put on here. Um, I wanted to talk about my perspective on um, a relationship that I just got out of. Maybe not just got out of, but it sort of faded and now we're in radio silence period. Um, and this is really for two reasons, really. One, to clear my conscience. Uh, you know, talking about this kind of stuff always helps whenever I have the opportunity. I talked to my therapist today about it. I've been talking to my parents and family about it. I figured I'd just compile all my thoughts into one video. And the second is, if my ex or any of her friends are judging me on social media, if they're stalking my pages, then maybe they'll come across this and maybe they'll get my side of things. Not wish that's very wishful thinking though, and I certainly hope that they're not stalking me because that would be very scary. And yeah, I don't want to think about that. So basically, I'll start off with this. Um, to set some context, the main difference between me and my ex were essentially I was very left brain oriented. She was very right brain oriented. What I mean by that is I focused a lot on keeping things practical in the relationship. So what that means is, focusing on ourselves and building ourselves up. Um, you know, she had plans to go to grad school. I was looking for a job out of college. Uh, we were about to go undergo major transitions in our life. And I wanted for us to focus on that, but support each other through it. Um, that was the important thing for me. If we can't have that, then it's not going to work. We can have our personalities as well, but the most important thing for me was to focus on that. Um, she tended, not saying she didn't feel the same way, but I think she tended more towards the romantic aspect of it. And what I mean by that is she liked feeling validated about how much I loved her, um, which is fine. Some people need that. Um, I didn't feel like I needed that a whole lot. She did it on her own accord, but also, you know, I knew in my heart of hearts that she did, like me for who I was. Uh, you know, everything we had been through up to that point had demonstrated that to me. Um, and I said I love you to her after she said to me, you know, knowing that that was the case. The only reason I was comfortable saying those words is because I knew that she cared about me at that level. But she tended to focus more on the intimacy stuff. So that would kind of clash a bit. So, for example, when initially we're talking about, our arrangements after college, she would be at grad school, I'd be working, ideally close to, like, or in the same city as her. Um, the initial idea for her was that we'd be living in the same place. And I was like, that's not going to work. We should, uh, you know, have our own places and take care of ourselves first and, have some real world experience for ourselves for like maybe a year, and then move in together. Um, that was an initial argument, but, ultimately she understood exactly where I was coming from. Um, so that wasn't exactly a problem, but just to give you some context as to, where our thought train differed. She liked the idea of us, spending as much time together as possible, whereas I was more on the side of making sure that we did what we needed to do to get our foundation straight, um, and making sure that we were the best that we could be for each other. So really just two different approaches, both respectable, and they work for different people at different times. So my problem with that, there's no problem I have with that, with her approach at least. Where that came to where it came to like sort of a full stop, the reason why things sort of broke off was because, sometime mid-June, she messaged me and was like, I feel like a lot of romantic things have fallen off the wayside. I was wondering if we should do like more stuff together. And I was like, okay, fine. I can always get behind that, but I also had trouble understanding how that fell off the wayside. So like she sort of hemmed and hawed here and there about, between that and, me not doing as many gestures of love, recently. But I think that's more like a situational change. That was because we were out of school and not seeing each other necessarily every weekend. We'd be more focused on our personal lives. She'd be more focused on getting an apartment. I'd be more focused on getting a job. We were focusing on ourselves, and yeah, that's gonna fall off the wayside. So I thought of it as like, well, yeah, that's it's natural for us to fall off the wayside. But she kept rehashing the point that, I could have done this, this, and this. Like, she said, like, oh, you don't have to go get flowers, but she had secretly hoped that I did. Like, I'm supposed to read minds. And that I took issue with. I was like, well, okay, I had no idea. This was, 5-6 months had passed, and I had no idea that was the case for her. And that all kind of blindsided me a bit. So I took that in as, I haven't been good enough for her. And she used the term, it's like, I need to mix things up a bit, as if, things had gone boring or stale, which I also took to heart, right? I mean, how could you not? I felt this was when I started feeling like things were falling on me. And I kept asking her, it's like, well, what do you need me to do? Do I need to take more initiative? She kept going back and forth on some of the issues, and it's something she did, consistently when the topic was brought up, both at that time and at later parts. So where it came to a full stop was I still was internalizing all those feelings, and after the gym, it was really sad. My mom and I had a huge argument. I forgot about exactly what, but essentially I was just left to myself, not in the best of states, and I was just in bed. And I messaged Maddie being like, I took a picture of, the stuff I did on the treadmill, my treadmill stats for that day, because I went to the gym. And I was like, oh, I guess they said I was going to do an hour. I only did like 40 minutes. I guess that's not good enough for you. Very passive-aggressive text, so I take responsibility for that. That's not a good way for handling the situation. I hadn't had my thoughts all collected at then, so when we called, I was definitely not in a good state of mind. I should have waited until I had collected my thoughts properly before discussing this topic with her, because what wound up happening was I was still very confused about what she wanted to do, and was panicking because it seemed like I wasn't as valued as I was, or I felt like I was, and that began to worry me, because when, like I said earlier, it's like we had two different approaches to this. It's like, am I not was I not striking the right balance in this relationship the entire time? Like, what happened? I was so confused and stressed out, and that led to me basically. She mentioned something about like, oh, I never said you weren't good enough, and I yelled at her, being like, oh, well, you might as well should have, and then hung up. And she didn't take that well. We decided to opt for silence for a few days while she moved up to New York, which we did. And as she was driving up, she called me. I apologized for everything and tried to explain what was going through my head. I had already explained to her all that stuff. And she called me and basically broke up with me, which, I was like, well, I respect the decision. I definitely was trying to, be like, are we really going to end it on this note? Like, I swear I can do better. It was really just like a low moment for me. And she stuck by it, right? And where I'm going with this is that I originally wanted to be like, okay, well, if this is the way things are going to be, I'm going to take 1 month for myself, for space. I think actually I originally said 3 months or something. I said, like, I'm going to need space to, clear myself of all this because, we're talking right now, we're telling each other all these positive things, and, I wanted to end it on a positive note and keep it that way. And I want to just cut it off clean. And I originally said 3 months. She said that's way too long. So I negotiated down to like, let's do 1 month. And, we can do another check-in and see how we both feel, right, about, talking to each other or if we need more time. And that was the original plan. And, the phone call was pleasant. We didn't want to let each other go, but eventually cut off. We did. And that was that. Until later that night, she texted me being like, oh, I just got here. Thought you'd like to know. And she was saying how she was very lonely in the city. And, I succumbed to being nice to her in that situation because I could have just like cut it off well before everything, which I probably should have, because what that kind of started was, she was like worrying about like, I'm so alone and, I'm gonna miss you so much, and like, are we really gonna have to wait a whole month? And to settle things out, like, so she wouldn't freak out, because I knew she was alone. I know she gets anxious. It's like, it's part of who she is, and I had sympathy toward that. And I said, oh, we can talk casually. We have to be careful about it, but we can talk casually. And what that eventually led to was, like, us kind of going back and forth with each other, eventually rehashing, our point of view on the moment things broke off, and I forgot whose idea it was, but like, I think it might have been hers. It was sort of like both our fault in this situation, where we agreed to like keep the door open per se, meaning like we were going to, take our time to be selfish and focus on ourselves and get our footing, and then maybe reconsider in the future. And that was a huge mistake, because what that did to us was it put, first of all, a lot of expectation on me, as, she was already moved into the city, and I still needed to get a job. And from my perspective, I already had the pressure of, wanting to move out and be independent on my own. Not maybe totally independent, but at least having my own place and being able to make my own decisions and my own lifestyle choices. Sooner rather than later, I had already had that pressure, but now it was falling on me to, do that so that, things could happen again sooner, right? Because we ran into a situation where, I don't know how we managed to spiral ourselves into this, but like essentially what happened was we both agreed to, have dinner on July 4th and then stay over. My mom caught wind of this and basically told me, if you do that, you're not coming back home. Because she was really worried that, my feelings were still very raw. And, if I got hurt because of all that or something happened later, after I re-entered that, it's like, I'm just going to get hurt more. And she was really worried for my sake. So that's an example of what it brought us to. And when I had to tell her that I had to cancel, she did not take it well at all. She repeatedly called me an asshole. She took the wrong way in the subway, and as she was frustrated and blamed me for it. And I was really trying my best to calm her down and try to explain, like, listen, I was between a rock and a hard place. I don't know what you could possibly expect me to do. I mean, if you really want me to, I didn't say this to her, but it's like, if you really want me to fight, potentially separate myself from my family, to get back into something that, like, was ended by you, then, like, that's just completely unrealistic, right? Like 10% of all couples or something that, like, break off, don't stay together when they try to get back together. So it's ridiculous to, make an ultimatum like that. And I told her, I had to cancel spending the night, but in her eyes, it was like I was canceling everything. But I told her, it's like, I'm going to talk to my mom about us getting dinner or getting brunch or what have you. Still very upset. She talked about, hurting herself, and that was a whole another 2.5 hour call, of making sure that, like, she was okay. And, me sort of pouring my whole heart out about the situation. It's like, listen, you're a great person. You're not alone. You have me here supporting you, right? Because, I still care. At that point, my heartstrings were fully tugged on. So were hers. So it was like, we still cared about each other, to that extent. And, she decided ultimately we had brunch together, which was nice, I thought. And then she went back to her parents for July 4th, which we both agreed afterward was, like, the best possible thing that she could have done for herself there. And, things from then on continued pretty much as normal. I think, she later came to me having a gripe about me, not coaching her through a rainstorm when I had to go sailing with my family and had to sort of leave the call. She argued that, as a friend, she always likes to be fiercely loyal and, make sure that they're okay. And it's like, I agree, but, we're kind of in this odd spot. I didn't say this to her, but, like, we're kind of in this odd spot where, like, I'm trying to sort out my priorities and, work on myself and rebuild my connections with my family. And they kept telling me to hang up the fucking phone, and come with them. So, that was like a whole discussion. But, like I said earlier, this kind of connects back to like, sort of me focusing on the practical side of things and individuality versus her focusing on, being dedicated and being intimate with each other. Like, this is happening even after, things ended, per se. So the next real mishap, I think, happened, basically, like, Friday the 14th. 13th, I think, actually. It's July, right? So, yeah, it's Friday the 13th. And, she was staying over at a friend's because they were going to go hiking tomorrow. I was out sailing, and then we went to my friend's house. I drank a bit. I partake in the devil's lettuce. Kind of like these droplet things, right? And we were talking, and it somehow came to the point where she was like, "Oh, haven't you been drinking enough?" And I was like, "It's like, oh well, I'm fine." He's like, "Well," and she's like, "Oh, please don't. Like, you get too angsty when you're drunk." And then I mentioned that, like, "Oh, I'm high, so I'm probably not gonna be angsty." And from there, she was like, "Oh, well, aren't you just so edgy? Have fun." And then I was sort of like, "Well, what's the matter?" Right? It's like, I just said I wasn't gonna be angsty. She's like, "Smoking weed isn't cool outside of college," which, I mean, some of her best friends do, and like, this all gave me the impression that she was just like mad that she was missing out on it. Like, she was, mad that she wasn't having as much fun. Like, her and her friend were like making cookies and cider and watching A Quiet Place. So, like, they were doing practically the same thing that I was doing. So I didn't get that point of view. I later called. She suggested I call her. I did. That was a big mistake because I couldn't really portray my thoughts like correctly to words. But I was still, conscious of everything. So I told her, it's like, hey, this isn't a weekly fucking occurrence. Like, she said, it's like, oh, stop smoking weed every single week. Like, first of all, this is the second time this summer that's happened. And then she sort of transitioned to the point, it's like, what about your jobs? Like, you had 2 interviews this week. It's like, what if they ask you about? What about drug tests? And I'm like, first of all, I'm going on a cruise. I didn't say this to her, but, like, I'm going on a cruise. So that's 1 week I can't go back for any of the round 2 interviews. Both the places said if they asked me back, it would be for a round 2 interview, which would be the following week. And, given how much I partook, it would be out of my system after the second week. So there would be 0 chance that I would have a drug test, before it cleared my system, right? I didn't tell her this. I thought it was like a ridiculous proposition. I sort of said the thing, it's like, well, they're kind of dropless. What set her off was that I said, it's like, oh, why do you even care? And I meant that more in a way as like, it's like, why are you so mad about this, right? Like, why does this piss you off so much? Like, I wanted to get to the bottom of it because it seemed really like she just was mad that I was, I guess, having fun without her. I don't want to say it like that, but like, just like, it seems like I was having a good time, and she might have been self-conscious about that. She's told me before that she doesn't like feeling left out of things, which is understandable, And her response to that was along the lines of like, well, maybe I shouldn't. And I was like, oh, all right, well, I'm gonna go. And she's like, I'm gonna go too. She texted me one more time being like, oh, be safe. And then, that same night, I apologized to her. There were a lot of things I could have said while under that influence. It's like I was safe because my brother was going to drive me home. I didn't tell her that either. But it's like there were a lot of things I could have texted her, that would have just made things a lot worse. One of my irrational fears was that she was going to get with said best friend that she was going hiking with. And I would have said it in like this really immature and stupid way, right? And that would have messed up everything. So while I get that I didn't handle the situation very well, I shouldn't have called her. I shouldn't have said, "Why do you even care?" I should have rephrased that. It's like I do give myself credit for holding back on a lot of things. And I understand that she, was just trying to be protective, or either that was, or just jealous. It's like that's all normal stuff. Or maybe you could argue maybe a little bit over the top, but like I don't think so. It's like I see it from both sides. But like really, I just thought it wasn't like a huge deal, so I apologized for it. And then basically she says like, "Hey, I appreciate the apology and everything, but we basically need some space." She included saying it's like we can keep this streak alive, the Snapchat streak, and please contact me if you find yourself in a position of like harming yourself or what have you. And I was like, that's okay, awesome. So that a day goes by and we basically are like, okay, I'm good on the silence. But then I thought about it some more. I woke up at like 5:45 in the morning, or something like that, something ridiculous, because I was on a boat and I had trouble sleeping, and I essentially said to her, it's like, well, I wanted to like get my full side of the story off my chest. Now that I had like a clear head, I felt like that needed to be said so there wouldn't be any bad vibes. So I basically explained like the whole like it would be out of my system before any of the job things. I didn't mean like why do you even care, like as in a attacking way. It was more just like why are you getting uppity about this? Like what's going on? I explained that like if I do something on social media or my blog that like seems like it's an attack on her, it's not. It really isn't. Like I try and you check all that stuff now. I've kept it pretty damn positive. I've deleted some stuff, but there were some things I could have kept up that would not be good. Not from the perspective of attacking her, but like just like too much information about myself. For example, I'll just save it for later about what I could have posted. But anyway, I also stopped sharing my location. I said basically it's like I'm gonna go take some space and talk to my therapist, and then decide what to do. And then I stopped sharing my location, and immediately after that, there was like a 3-hour gap in between me posting that or texting her that, and then stopped sharing my location. And then immediately after I stopped sharing my location, she got, she was very angry about that. She called me right after wanting to take some space, saying it's like, why'd you stop sharing your location? I was like, I don't feel comfortable with it this time. We're taking space. And she's like, what do you think I'm gonna do? I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, I'm not gonna comment on it. I just think you're being melodramatic. Enjoy the cruise. And after that, she blocked my number, unfollowed me on Instagram and Twitter, slashed her Instagram of most of the photos of us, and over the course of the next day, purposely ended the snap streak. And from my perspective, that I wasn't getting the vibe that she just wanted radio silence. It was more the vibe that she was like really upset with me. I apologized. I tried sending an apology over text, realized I was blocked. Sent over Snapchat, she wasn't opening it. Sent over Facebook, being like, listen, I'm sorry about all this. Like, the last thing I want is for us to be mad at each other. I'll try to leave you alone, but, like, this has really fucked me up, and, I don't feel very safe right now. I went to my dad and my brother being like, hey, I don't feel so good. Like, they noticed that, like, I was feeling down, and they were just like, basically, cheer up, otherwise you're going to bring us both down. So, super good, right? I didn't feel like I had, like, anyone to go to. And she didn't respond to any of it. She eventually killed off the snap streak. And, all of that kind of manifested into me thinking that this was like all my doing. Like, I took on all the blame in this whole situation, and I felt like I was like being this terrible person to her. And in combination with the fact that like my dad was saying like, oh, well, you better cheer up, otherwise you're just gonna bring everyone else down. Like, I felt like I couldn't express that pain, and I resorted to wanting to cut myself. You can't see it, but like on my wrist, well, not my wrist, but like my palm, there's like a scratch mark here. I started off by like, cutting into like this part here. It's like healed basically now. And it was, pretty clean. It was like mostly like a paper cut, but there was some blood. It was after I had swam, so like, pretty easy to, get through the skin. And, for a while that was like, it was like, oh, I'm insatiated, right? Like, I could, express my pain in a way that, that like, I couldn't express it to anyone, so I just felt like if I had physical pain, I could get over it, and like, that would be my fix for that. That's like the kind of stuff that I could have kept on my blog post that she could have seen and been like, that wouldn't have been fair to her. She just would have worried about me a lot more. I think, there were times where she probably was worried more about me a lot more. Like, I went on my blog analytics and saw that, like, one of the posts, like, there was a lot more activity on it than usual, at least on my blog page. And it was probably because of a post I had that, like, had this weird cryptic message about knives. So I assume that, she might have seen that and started to worry, but, there wasn't any response. So it felt like, it started to feel like I was just alone in this, and she was so pissed off that she just didn't even want to help me. And that was all, a terrible feeling. I was just under the impression that I had just blown away, like, any chance of friendship, and just like mucked everything up, and I was just this terrible person. Throughout the course of the cruise, like, I called my mom eventually because there was, after dinner one night, I had like this overwhelming urge to just get back on the boat, like get into my cabin and start going ham on my wrist. Like, it was crazy how, like, it was almost like an addiction that I had developed just from like doing it once. Because, like I said, I couldn't express my pain in any other way. I felt like I couldn't. So I was like, I have to, gotta do this. I've been waiting all day, right? It's like been pent up. So it's like, I basically grabbed a kitchen knife. And it was too dull to really penetrate the skin. Like, I was really hacking at it. I wasn't really doing anything. And then, like, I just sort of stopped and I was like, what am I doing? And I called my mom. I think she was still in Boston at this point, visiting family. I didn't want to bother her, but I was just like, I can't do this right now because I can't like leave her alone because this is urgent. Like, I was really probably gonna do a lot of damage to myself physically. And I called her basically explaining everything. I told her like the full story about me getting high and her getting mad about it. From her perspective, like I had done nothing wrong. I kept trying to defend, uh, you know, my ex on this, and she was like, no, 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 you did nothing wrong. Like, it was kind of, you know, out there for her to, act how she acted. And it's like, please don't hurt yourself and whatnot. And eventually, I talked to my dad about it. He later found the knife in my room, and, it was a whole conversation. But I think after all that stuff, it's like my family started to, actually understand why I was so sad. And it's like I had told them that, like, we were doing silence, but I hadn't told them the full details and about how I felt about the situation, how I felt like everything was sort of falling apart because of me. And I thought that all the way up to the end of the cruise. And basically, a lot of it was, there was like a day where I just felt like posting like on my Twitter profile, just like sending her positive energy. Because I was really hurting, but I didn't want, like I said, I was still kind of in the mindset that like I had done everything wrong, and I couldn't contact her about it. So I felt like, just putting it up on my profile would, it would be out there in the universe. And maybe she'd see it, or something. I don't know. And, from then on, basically up until Saturday, I decided to message her again, being like, hey, listen, I just got back from the cruise. I really am trying to keep things positive. And if you'd like to reach out, my number's always open. Still is, by the way. Like, she's not blocked on it. Read receipts are on and everything. Like, there's nothing to worry about. There aren't any, curtains or, any obstacles she has to leap through to get to me. It's like, totally open for conversation and making amends, because I wanted, at least if things were going to end, I just wanted them to end on a positive note. To just make it more clean rather than this, because like this was really starting to put a damper on what I thought of the relationship. It's like now I sort of realize it's like, you gotta separate the two, because the two were kind of isolated periods of how we interacted with each other. But, I was really focusing on that. There was a night, I think it was Monday night, following when I got back from the cruise. I had uploaded a bunch of photos. I think what this was, it could have been, I mean, this could be totally wrong, but this is like from my perspective. I basically uploaded a bunch of photos because I was like, well, I guess if things are ending, I should, delete as many reminders of Maddie to, make it as as less distracting as possible, right? I didn't want to be constantly reminded of it and then have to go through all the motions again. So basically what I did was I uploaded like photos so that like, your photos on your Facebook, on your timeline, like none of the ones that had her on it were showing up. They were all just like photos of me on cruise. And I think what happened was she probably saw this and was a little hurt by it. I understood that we were like both hurting. That much I knew. But I just thought like, she was doing a lot of these things just like because she was just angry with me, and that really worried me a lot. And what she essentially did was she unfriended me. How I found this out was like basically went to my timeline, because I had already lost like one friend. Like, I was losing some friends because like they were deactivating their accounts, so I was just checking to see if they had another deactivation, and then I lost another friend. I lost another friend. And I was like, who could be this time? And then, she wasn't showing up on my friends list. And at that point, I thought, like, well, she's basically cut off any mode of contact for me. I guess I just fucked up so majorly. And I basically panicked a lot. I went on Snapchat. I temporarily posted this story about, like, it's losing a best friend so hard. I really hope we can make things right. Like, people who saw that, like, one of my friends was messaging me. It's like, are you okay? Like, like it was just a black screen with text. And then I was just like, this can't end like this. I don't want it to end like this. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. Like, I was seriously thinking of doing, like, reverting back to, like, cruise mode. And, because everyone was, like, in bed at that point, and, like, I couldn't express my pain in that moment without disturbing anyone. So I felt like I needed to, release it somehow. I was about to do that, and I was like, no, I can't. And I tried to think of other ways I could, contact her, being like, please, let's not do this. I don't want things to end badly. I don't want you to think poorly of me. Like, what we had was good, and we should, like, we should give it the proper, if it's going to end, we should give it the proper respect that it deserves. And I remember that I had WhatsApp, and I saw that she was on it, and I basically tried to message her. She's like, listen, I don't want to, it's like, I know it's unfair to you, but, like, I don't want to break the promise of, like, not hurting myself again. And, like, I really need your help right now. And she ignored it, and, what happened after was, like, one of our mutual friends, not really mutual, it's like I knew him from my freshman year, and then not really after that, and then she's kind of best friends with him. It's the same guy who, she went hiking with. Basically reached out to me being like, hey, she briefly mentioned that, like, you weren't doing okay. She might be annoyed with me by saying this. It's like, I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I said, I'm not okay. Like, it just seems like I don't understand what I did to piss her off so much. And then he sort of explained that, it wasn't as much that she just needs radio silence and wants to transition from a person of assistance. And, I understood at the time, and I was like, thank you. I had a brief spur in the morning where, I was like, oh, were you pulling a front? Because something seemed a little off by that. She, like, to give you some context, before things broke off, like, in the just before she moved up to the city, I made, like, another really cryptic blog post, and then he, like, messaged me out of the blue being like, hey, I just wanted to check and see how your job search is going. Probably to make sure, like, I was still alive or something. Like, they were probably worried about me. So what I figured at that point was that, like, basically he wasn't trying to give off this vibe. He was, like, saying, it's like, oh, this is from my point of view, or I don't really know what she's thinking. I think she was using him as a mouthpiece again. And sort of realizing this now, it's actually kind of pissed me off a lot. That she doesn't have the proper respect to, give me face to face and try to resolve all this. That's one thing that pissed me off about it. The other was that, she made no mention of, wanting radio silence. Like, the last I heard, she was just like, oh, you can contact me if something is wrong. And that wasn't the case, and I went through a lot of self-harm and pain and confusion because of that. And I can't wrap my head around, like, her just flat out ignoring, like, cries of plea. It makes me think that, like, going back to, all the times, even after the breakup, that I was there for her when she was in pain and was, threatening to harm herself. Like, thinking back to those, it just seems so unfair that she doesn't respect me enough to give me the same treatment. It seems very selfish on her part. That's essentially what I was discussing with my therapist today, is that I was trying to defend her in this situation, but my therapist kept saying, it's like, that's really selfish of her. Like, that she basically dictates the terms of engagement. Like, I asked for my space, and like, that was a no-no, right? And she was being unfair about that. But now I'm, when she asks for her space, and I can't quite keep that promise as much as I'd like, she's just completely cold about it. Essentially what I'm getting at is that, whether she sees this or not, she might try to contact me in the future. She's done this with other boyfriends. I don't know what's exactly going through her head right now. I don't know if she is making me out to be a bad person to her friends, like maybe spreading some false rumors, maybe spreading false narratives to like her friends or her parents to make herself look like the good one here. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to be as objective as I can about this video and how I've been expressing my thoughts, because for me personally, this was a real wake-up call. Saying I love you to someone meant a lot to me. It always has. And I did in this case. I made myself I put myself on a silver platter, and it didn't work out. And for me, that's like, it's a huge wake-up call in that, like, I need to learn more about myself, like my weaknesses, like what I can improve on, and most importantly, like what I want out of these kinds of things. Because otherwise, it's like, how do I trust my heart and gut feeling again? So I've been trying to be as objective with myself as I can. There are definitely things in this situation that I could have handled better. Maybe I was supposed to know that she just wanted radio silence after, not responding to anything. I was going through a lot. It was pretty mentally scarring. So, if I didn't act perfectly, at least perfectly by her standards, then I'm sorry about that. But the reality is I'm human too. And, it could have very well been the same situation for you when I wanted space. And if I just cut you off right then and there, as you were like lonely and like acting, like, I don't know if you were acting, but like, just like you were so lonely in the city and needed someone to support you, and wanted me to support you. If I just cut you off then and there, you probably would have reacted similarly, except I was clear about the terms of engagement. I wanted space. What pisses me off is that, I feel misled. I feel betrayed. I feel like I can't trust her anymore. Because it seems like, after everything I've done, she's gone and done this like really selfish thing from my perspective, and is running with it, and is like totally avoiding all responsibility for it, I imagine. And one of the hardest things for me now is not the breakup itself. This whole situation has thankfully shown that I never want to be with this person again, ever. Because it's clear that like when the times get really rough, they're not really like, they don't care enough to either fight for me or, like, be there for me. Right? Like I was. But, you know, in the event that they contact me, like, sometime further down in the future, having seen this video or not, you know, I'm probably just going to communicate the fact that, like, hey, listen, this whole experience was really mentally and physically scarring for me, and I need to take some time to reflect on whether or not I can stay in contact with this person. You know, even if it's just like periodic contact, like once a month, like maybe once a year check-ins, right? I don't know how to handle that. I don't know what she's been up to as far as, like, you know, during this whole, you know, purgatory period between breaking up and radio silence. Was she going out and seeing other people while still leading me on? It's like I don't know all the facts. You know, so it's like I just don't know anymore how to feel about this person. And I'm not saying that I don't want to keep in contact, but there's a lot I need to, like, forgive myself for and forgive this person for before that can happen. One thing I want to say to this person is, like, you know, I've always said this at the end of my messages, is that I really do hope for the best of you in life. Like, you know, you changed my life for the better. I changed your life for the better. I really don't usually believe in, like, fate, but I did think in this case that fate brought us together to help us sort through some of our problems, and then we'd be on our merry way. And that's fine. That's how life works sometimes. I want this person to remember that she is not alone. That she will find people that support her. She has people that support her already. If she ever feels like she is, then she just has to keep remembering that, like, she has all these people that care about her. You know, even when it might not seem like it, even when she lost someone that, you know, cared about her a lot. You know, she's going to do great things. I'm going to do great things. And, you know, personally, I wouldn't have redone anything. I think it was meant to play out as it was meant to play out. So, to this person, I say, you know, I hope the best for you. And, you know, if we do mend things, great. But I am not in a state where I want to do that. At least not right now. It's going to take some time to recover from all this. And, you know, talking might not be good for that because, you know, once we start seeing other people, who knows how we're going to react. We can brush it off and say, like, you know, like, oh, we'll be able to handle it. But, like, if one of us starts seeing another person first, then it's like, well, who knows how the other person is going to react at this time. It's easy to say it, but, like, it's harder to really gauge how you're going to feel once it happens. Just like I'm having a hard time envisioning if/when this person contacts me and how I feel about it then. I have a really hard time envisioning whether or not I'm going to be ready to talk to that person again because of what happened. But I do wish the best for her. I really do. Maybe that's me being generous, or maybe it's just out of the goodness of my heart. Maybe it's that I, you know, still care. But I hope for both of us that we find happiness, because it's not each other. So, with that all said, that's pretty much everything that's off my chest right now. I'm trying to remember if I forgot anything. Yeah, I mean, if this person sees this, then if you want to talk and give more of your perspective, I'm happy to always to discuss it. I've always been happy to discuss things and try to sort it out. I feel like I've been good at that, at compromising. I don't want it to diverge into another fucking fight, right? That's not productive. I just want, if you're comfortable, of course, to reach out and have a civil conversation about this. And don't use your fucking friend as a mouthpiece again, because that would just annoy me a lot. If you do, then that's just I'm just gonna block both of you and never see any of you again, because that right there would just be you don't have enough respect, or respect for me, or respect for yourself to want to do this on your own. I'm gonna drink some water. Something I want to also, express in this video is a few things, really. I guess sort of rant about how you thought that I felt about you. I get the impression that maybe in hindsight that I wasn't giving enough to you, or I didn't love you enough, or love you as much as you did. To which I'm saying that couldn't be any less the truth. First of all, through all of your tough times, I never once, when you've blamed me for stuff, or yelled at me, it's I never once considered breaking up. I never once considered giving up. I always wanted to fix things and do that, and that's how much I cared about us at the time. I was only so practical about things because I was thinking long term. You talked about seeing us getting married, and I was like, okay, well, in order to do that, let's focus on ourselves, because we have a lot to do, and there's going to be a lot to do afterward. Especially if you can throw kids into the equation. It's all this romantic stuff that you said fell off the wayside earlier, that's going to fall off the wayside again. It's the only reason I was thinking so practically and try to keep us grounded is because I was thinking about seeing that future with that person, and wanting it to the point where I was saying, okay, well, this is the best way we can do it, right? Because life's going to have its ups and downs. We're going to have great times together. We're going to have not so great times. We were going to have some not so great times together. But ultimately, the goal is to build something. And you got to start at the foundation. You can't just put gumdrops on top of it and call it a healthy relationship. It's not all about romance or feeling loved. It's support. It is trust. It is, sticking by the person through thick and thin. If love was that conditional, then I'm only going to say is, good luck having kids, because like that's just throws a wrench in everything. Good luck dealing with another person grieving about like their parents' death later down the line. It's like there's so many things in life that life's going to throw at you um, that are going to make you question a lot of things, and things about you are going to change. But if you have a strong foundation and strong desire to want to go through it with that person um, because of X, Y, and Z, then hold on to it. It's like you don't have to check every single box, Not everything has to be perfect. Not everything has to be your way. And also, whoever you do pick, they don't serve you. They don't serve your needs. I'm probably exaggerating this. I'm probably going to be like, never said you were meant to serve my needs. And it's like, well, just think about it like this. Everything that takes work and compromise, right? I wasn't going to change because you said I wasn't doing enough. I tried to, and I was losing sight of myself, and I started getting very self-conscious and depressed and not knowing who I was anymore. And you can't ask that of anyone, right? The guys aren't meant to, in any healthy relationship, a guy isn't meant to bear all the burden on his shoulders, right? It's a team effort. That's why there's two people. It takes two in a relationship, right? And that's what I was really focused on. It's like making sure we were as strong as a team we could be. So going back to that point, if you thought that I didn't love you as much as you love me, you couldn't have been more wrong. That's simple. That's the simple fact about it. I guess something I also want to address. I keep running this over, but I do keep remembering that there's things that I just like to talk about out loud. They could be totally wrong, but they're just all from my perspective. This was a big insecurity of the other person, but they, were super insecure about being overbearing. And, from my perspective, it's like I know where this person is coming from as far as like they have anxiety. They have had past traumas that have affected them in these ways, and I understand that like the way in which they operate is different, and the way in which they care and try to be protective of people is different and sometimes really radical, right? It's like, and I understood all that, but there were times where it felt like things were, I was being smothered with like, check-ins or consistently wanting to know. There was an instance where like I went to go get dinner, but I stopped by CVS first, and there was an instance where she questioned me, being like, "Hey, were you going directly to this place?" I was like, "No," and she wound up ultimately divulging the fact that she was looking at my location on iMessage, and I was like, "Well, I appreciate you telling me." If she didn't tell me that, then I would have had some serious red flags. But because at least with that, I can understand that she was, she just is trying to be protective, and but there's still a sense of trust there. It's not to deceive. It's like it's not meant to like try to trip me up or deceive anyone. She was honest about it, and I was honest about it. So, what I'm trying to say is that like, just try to balance yourself out a bit more with this kind of thing. you don't have to be in control of everything. Not everything has to feel like you're in control. I understand that, this person had, dissociation problems, and it felt like they weren't always in control themselves, and the feeling of control is nice. But other people are not meant to be controlled. The basis of any good relationship is trust. And I think they had a conversation about this a while back about true trust. I think I mentioned that term, and she was sort of confused about what I meant, but I was like, I hopefully want you to get to the point where it's like you really do trust me, to the point where it's like, you won't need checkups, or you just know that I'm by your side and I have your back, right? And you can be your own person, right? For me, I gotta, focus on being more attentive to my person in the future. I'm not saying I'm totally innocent, right? Like, I definitely could have been more romantic, right? There's times where I could have put more effort into, maybe not understanding, your interest, because, I went to see this musical. I watched this musical with her. It's like I did rowing. Well, not like rowing, but I did ERC. I did the gym version of rowing. I was, if it felt like I was more, if I dictated things more about in terms of interest, I was just more passionate about my stuff. I was more expressive, and that kind of goes back to I cared so much and trusted this person so much that I was able to be 100% myself around them, right? I didn't have to mask or reveal anything. I could just say, oh, this is what's going on in this thing I participate, right? Or, oh, I want to watch this. But I didn't want to obviously take time away from her if she had a problem with it. But the point is that I was more expressive about my stuff. If she wanted me to really watch something, she could have told me, it's like, hey, I really want you to watch this and see what you think. But there was times where I could have been more engaged with it. I think there was times where she asked me, it's like, well, what do I think of this? And I'm like, it's like I wouldn't give much of an opinion. I'd just be like, yeah, it's alright. So I gotta be more self-conscious about that. I gotta really engage more. It's easy to get caught up in, especially when you're focusing on trying to better yourself. It's easier to get caught up in, not focusing on some other people. Not trying to use this as an excuse, but certainly my pervasive development disorder has something to do with how the fact of me not always being the best at communicating with people. I'm sure I'm doing all these weird mannerisms as I'm talking to this camera right now. I don't know, but the short of it is that that's something that I can improve on, right? Other things I can improve on for future relationships. Being more honest with my feelings. I think that's something I also struggle with. It's like sometimes I sometimes like to forgo my own feelings to make the other person feel good. But that kind of tense things up. And there are instances where you want to do that, but I think if I have more clear and open and honest communication about how I feel, I'm less likely to let's say blow up in the future. So those are things I have for myself, right? There's so many things to be learned from this, and I'm much more interested in learning from all of it than I am. just sort of wasting it away. Or just sort of pondering over it and thinking about the should-haves or would-haves of it all. Because, like, you know, it's done. I think the last thing I want to say is that, you know, I don't know what happens later down the line, whether or not this person sees it, whether or not a friend of hers sees this, whether or not no one sees this, like no one actually cares. You know, later down the line, I think, you know, the way I always thought about the dynamic was that, like, we were best friends first, and then romantic second. That was my perspective on it. And for me, it would be nice to, you know, be that best friend again, if possible. But I certainly don't want to, you know, get anyone's feelings stuck in a blender again, either. So, is there anything else I could say right now? No, I think that's it. I'm just gonna send some more positive energy. I hope, you know, she's doing well. I hope everyone that watches this is doing well, obviously. Just like I wish for myself to be doing well every day now, because that's the best I can do. And yeah, sorry if this video was weird. But I figured I'd just, you know, get it out in the universe, whether I post it on YouTube or not. Still up in the air. I don't know. Maybe this will lead to something. Not sure yet. I'm gonna end it here because I don't know how to end these kind of things. Oh my god, I need to go to sleep. I have a job interview tomorrow. A second round interview. So, I need to go to sleep for that. But, I hope you at least somewhat were interested in this. If not, I'll just go back to making Salix videos. I haven't been very good about that. I haven't done the monthly commentary, but now I guess, you know, if you're watching this, you're a Salix subscriber. You know why I have had my mind off of Salix related stuff for a bit. Maybe it's too much information for you. Maybe, you know, you respect me more. You don't respect me as much now if you're on that site. If you're a random viewer floating on the internet just coming across this, you're probably thinking this guy is a psychopath. To which you might be right, but I'm just a guy with feelings from my own perspective. And if you're, you know, that person that, you know, is the primary subject of the video, aside from myself, then I hope you're doing well. A little weird that you're checking up on my YouTube channel, but I don't mind per se. I think it's normal behavior. We have so much social media floating around that there's a lot of information, so it's really hard to disconnect from all that. This isn't meant to, like, talk shit about you. It's just meant to clear my head. And, you know, if you want to talk about it or you want me to just delete the video, then give me the okay, and I will. Right? So, like I said, hoping for the best. Yeah, hope everyone enjoyed.